the self-consolidation would look like this. No money changes hands. You don't take a decrease in income.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Commercial Real Estate Secrets. I'm your host, Austin Hare. Our guest is Dr. Greg White. Dr. White serves as president and CEO of PepperPointe Partnerships. They currently have more than 90 dental locations and 100 doctors, so they've been growing very rapidly. And he co-founded the company that invented the world's top-selling custom breast prosthesis for post-mastectomy breast cancer survivors. On top of that, he's also owned multiple restaurant concepts. And so just a very well-rounded, distinguished guest. Dr. White, pleasure to have you on the show today.
Thank you very much, Austin. It's great to be here.
So what part of the country are you coming to us from?
Lexington, Kentucky.
All right. And is that your stomping grounds? Were you born and raised there?
Yeah, I'm originally from West Tennessee, born in and raised in a farming community there, and then got in my car one day when I was 18 years old, drove 300 miles to Lexington, and walked onto the steps of a college university, found somebody, and asked them how one went about going to college, and I've been here ever since.
Wow, that's crazy. So you didn't come from a family that got their college education then?
No one.
Wow. Okay. So was that like, what was the family business? Were you guys like agriculture? I mean, what was that like?
It was agriculture. We were sharecroppers. I was raised in the same house that my great grandfather had built in 1895. My little brother still lives there today, and I actually own that house now. But we farmed other people's land. So we basically leased the land, and we raised soybeans, cotton, and wheat.
Wow. And so was that like a profitable thing, or would you say that you grew up kind of like, with much to be desired in terms of income? Like, what was that like growing up for you?
Well, we got our first indoor bathroom when I was 8.
Wow.
And we got our first shower in the house when I was 15. That was the second bathroom that we had. I was one of 4 boys, so there were 6 of us sharing that one bathtub until I was 16, 17 years old. Not at the same time, Austin. We took turns in it. But so when you're farming someone else's land, the way that works is this. They don't charge you rent, but you have to put the crops in the ground. And so every expense associated with that, from the seed to the fertilizer to the fuel to the farm implements, tractors, and so forth, that's all at the sharecropper's expense. And then once the yield comes out, the people that put it in, the sharecroppers, get 2/3 of the total revenue, and the owner of the land gets 1/3. We farmed about 1,000 acres on the banks of the Mississippi River in West Tennessee, and the Mississippi River would flood most years and would cover the fields, and it would cover it for miles. And so you would basically spend the spring praying that the backwater went back down in time for the land to draw so that you could get the crops in time for you to be able to reap the harvest before the first frost. And so some years you didn't get anything. So you would put the entire crop in the ground and you would get 0 yield. Sometimes you wouldn't be able to get the crop in the ground at all. So some years you would make no money, some years you would lose money, and then some years you would make money. And if you do that over enough years, then you get a shower installed in your house when you're 17.
So what do you feel like when your kids are complaining that they have the 2nd or 3rd generation iPad that's now out of date? And you didn't have a shower until you were 17.
What do I think or what do I say?
Yeah, either one. I'm sure it helps put it in perspective, though.
Yeah, one thing I found out is nobody cares about the trials and tribulations of the parent's childhood.
Yeah, right. But I mean, so that's obvious. That's a very unique story, and obviously that shapes who you are as a person. Like, how do you think that your childhood, your upbringing, going through the highs and lows like that, prepared you for your career?
Well, you realize very quickly that if you're going to achieve anything, you're going to have to show up every single day. It requires a lot of grit, a lot of gumption, a lot of one failure after another. I think it was Winston Churchill that said the definition of success is moving from one failure to the next with no loss of enthusiasm. I think that is absolutely imperative, that you just keep moving forward, learning from those mistakes. When you go through life with no safety net, and you know that if you fail, you're going to be back on that tractor farming somebody else's land, praying for weather every night, one way or the other, it creates a work ethic in you and a healthy fear that drives you forward in everything you do. And I think that background has given me a tremendous advantage over people who may have had a less difficult path.
So it created a lot of grit, in short.
Yeah, I would say so.
All right. So your family hadn't gone to college. You're farmers. You just one day, I guess, when you're 18, decide to show up on the college doorsteps and ask how you get in. So, I mean, there's like a whole application process. Did they accept you? Did you have to prove yourself in any way? Like, how did you actually be able to enroll?
So I showed up. It was actually at the second semester. It was January of 1982. It was a really cold day. It's a Saturday before school started on Monday. I had left the house the day before without telling my parents where I was going, because I didn't think they would probably allow that. Wow. So I got in the car and I made the drive and
what made you decide to leave? Like, were you fed up of the lifestyle? I mean, like, what caused
I had to escape. I mean, really, if I hadn't have gotten out of there, I knew exactly what it was going to be like, and that was not the life that I saw for myself. There was nothing wrong with it. I just was not going to be able to live with that level of uncertainty day in and day out, and that depended upon factors 100% out of my control. So this was my first step in taking control of my future. Like I said, I was 18, and the doors were all blocked because it was a Saturday. School was starting back on Monday.
At this stage, were you thinking, like, what if I got myself into?
No, I was thinking that I need somebody to open a door because it's cold out here, and I'm wearing a members-only jacket, and it's very thin. So after about 15 or 20 minutes, I see this little fellow coming out of one of the buildings. Turned out it was the science building. He approached me, asked me what I was doing there. I told him that I was there to go to college. He said, well, have you applied? And were you here last semester? I said, no and no. And he said, well, that's not the way it's done. I said, I don't know what to tell you. I've got $23 in my pocket, half tank of gas. I can't get back home. And so I just would not let him leave me. And so finally he agreed to take me over. He was getting ready to meet some transfer students who were coming in and act as their advisor. He helped me get financial aid, a work-study job, and a job as a server, which I had never had in a restaurant chain. And at the end of that semester, the farming thing had gone really bad. This was in 82. I don't know, people probably will not remember this. But in 1980, there was a grain embargo imposed upon the Soviet Union by the United States as a result of the Soviet Union's invasion of Afghanistan, and that plummeted the prices of the commodities. And so over the years from 80 to 81 to 82, the farming was in really bad shape, and the independent farmer was dying away very quickly at that point. That was the beginning of it for them, beginning of the end. So I didn't have any money at all to be able to come back that next semester. So I went to this gentleman who had approached me that day, that cold morning. Turned out he was the chief of the science department there at this small liberal arts school, and told him that I wasn't going to be able to come back. Well, he and I had become friends over that semester, and we were having lunch every Wednesday at this little cafe right down the way. And he said, well, be sure and check your mailbox before you leave tomorrow. I hate that you're leaving. I think that, you got a good, promising future, but I understand. And I said, well, I hope you understand that, if I could, I would. And so I did check the mailbox the next day, and inside was a letter, single letter. Opened it up, and inside was a letter that stated I had been awarded the Thomas Jefferson Scholarship, full academic scholarship, room, board, tuition, all included.
Wow.
And so the moral of this story is nobody does anything in life alone. You have to have help along the way. and that help should be accepted, and it should be met with a great deal of gratitude. And so I never tell a story that I don't tell. The name of that fellow is Dr. Monroe Musnick. He and I couldn't have had any less in common. I mean, I was a waspy kid from West Tennessee, and he was a Jewish fellow who had made his way to Kentucky. And we ended up having lunch together every Wednesday from that point forward, many, many years until his passing.
Wow, that is a crazy story. Was he the reason that you got into dental?
Large part, for sure. He had a lot of influence, and I was looking at going into medicine originally, and a couple summers after that, I worked as an operating room technician in Memphis for a retinal eye surgeon. One night, really, really late, a 9-month-old who was having a routine eye surgery passed away unexpectedly and on the operating table. And I knew that night that I did not want to deal with those situations day in and day out. So that was my turn to move into something different. I had already gone through a process of identifying 5 different professions that I felt would meet the demands or give me the opportunity financially to live the lifestyle that I had envisioned. And so medicine was one, orthodontics was another one, and so that moved me into the orthodontic path, which meant application to dental school. Dr. Musnick gave me a really good recommendation. I got in 1984, completed dental school in 88, went into the orthodontics program at the University of Kentucky in 88, graduated in 91, and that's when I started my professional career.
And okay, so did you start out as an associate then?
Started out as an associate. I bought in to a very small practice that had been around for 12 years. It was the gentleman who would later invent the breast prosthesis that I would then partner with him on turning that into a success. We did that jointly, but he had had a practice for 12 years. It was very small. He brought me in as a partner. And after a few days in the practice, I realized that we were going to both starve to death in there if we didn't grow it. It was doing less than $200,000 a year in net collections.
Wow.
And so as a 50-50 partner, and he co-signed the note for me to buy that. I bought that half of the practice for $92,000. He co-signed the note because I had no means of income. I had gotten married 1 year prior to that, and my first daughter, first of 4 children, was born 2 weeks after my first day of work there in 1991.
So not stressful at all.
You know, no more so than every other day had been in the previous 15
That's
years.
true.
So, yeah, about the same.
So you buy this practice, it's not performing very well, you're not having very much money. And so what did you do to turn it around? Because obviously you had to turn it around at some point. You started scaling.
Yes. So we opened up a third location. He had 2 locations, one in Lexington, one in a little town north of here that has grown significantly since then, Georgetown. And we opened up one down in London, Kentucky, and just started creating relationships. I mean, that's really what it turns out. The most important thing in life are the relationships, and get started building them early. And I found out early on that people really like to talk about their favorite subject, which is themselves. And so if you can tailor a conversation to where you allow them to talk about themselves, you become likable. And so that was really something that I learned along the way is be very genuine about it, but, get to know people and let them talk about themselves. You learn a lot. They feel good in the process. And as a result of that, those relationships grew and the business grew as a result of those relationships.
That's cool. So you really went back to kind of the basics, square one, before anything technical and procedural and all that kind of stuff. It's just like getting the patients to know and like you.
Yeah. Everything in life is, the most important things in life are very, very simple. We unnecessarily complicate it by overthinking it, and just getting away from just the most basic things. And that is caring about people, being generous, being kind, being considerate, being empathetic. Judge yourself more harshly than you do others if you judge them at all. Try and take people based upon their intent and not their actions, but judge yourself on your actions and not your intent. And I find that that creates a great deal of personal joy and happiness in life when you live that way. When I start focusing on myself, which we all do all too often, I find that my level of happiness and joy diminishes, and I find out that somebody's always going to have more than me, so I want to play the comparative game. Just extend generosity and live the joy as a result of that.
Yeah, I really like that. It's so hard not to get wrapped up in it because we always have this notion that like, oh, if I just had a little bit more, then I can relax. But chances are you've achieved what you thought would have made you happy 10 years ago, and you're still looking to accomplish more. And so, yeah, it's a fool's errand. It seems like.
And that's true. There's never enough, okay? Yeah. And I always find it interesting that people tend to think that once I achieve that, then I will be happy.
Yeah.
You're happiest right now. Just look at what you have right now, who you have in your life. And if you're treating people well and you're being honest and you live up to high levels of integrity each and every day, then you've got everything that you're ever going to want or need right here. It doesn't get any better. I haven't found that the more money you have, the happier you are. It's not a correlation. The more things you have, the more things you have to insure, the more you have to maintain, the more you have to worry about. So you go through these cycles of life where you want things, and then you accumulate things, and then you dispose of things.
Yeah, exactly. I know it's cliche to say it's the journey, not the destination, but I look back and I reflect on my life, and the happiest times of my life were when I was on track to hit my goals, but way, way, way before I hit them. Yeah. But the second it became evident that it was a possibility, and I started making progress, that was the happiest moments in my life, is knowing that you're on the right track.
Yeah, no, I totally agree.
All right, so how long did it take you from, partnering in this one location to deciding that you're going to start a DSO? And I know that in 1991, you guys formed White, Greer, and Maggard Orthodontics, right?
Yeah, so, well, not exactly. So in 1991, it was me and the original partner, Dr. Ferguson. Okay. We brought in, he had two offices. We opened up the third in 1992. And then we brought in an associate in 1999, Dr. Maggard. In 2000, Dr. Ferguson retired, sold his interest to me and Dr. Maggard. And then in 2002, we did a merger with Dr. Jim Greer, and that is what formed White, Greer, and Maggard in 2002. We then opened up, that took us to 5 total locations. We then opened up de novo offices in 2006 and 2008, and then the housing market crash occurred. And so that was a big turning point in our industry, because the dental service organizations, and just for those that don't know what dental service organizations are, they're very akin to the MCOs in medicine. They're basically management companies who are now largely backed by private equity investors who purchase the assets, meaning the non-clinical assets, the accounts receivables, the leases, the names of the practices, the furniture, fixtures, equipment, basically everything except the patients and the patient records are purchased, or majority purchased from individual practices, and then they take over the management of those practices. And so the whole idea of that, if you listen to the DSOs, they're in it to take away the administrative burdens from the doctors. If you look at it from the institutional investor standpoint, who invest in the private equity funds, who then own the majority of the dental service organizations, their goal is to get a 30% return on their money. So all of that being said, the pitch by them is that the patients are going to get a better experience. It's going to be great for the doctors. My question is always, how are the investors getting their 30% return if it's so good for everybody else? So anyway, those started up in the mid-90s, and when the recession hit, the dentists in the United States basically hunkered down and tried to save themselves to prosperity. When you do that, you don't purchase practices that are for sale, nor do you hire these kids who are coming out of dental school. The kids need a job. They've got a lot of debt. So they take the jobs being offered by the DSOs, and the practices that are for sale are purchased by the DSOs. So from 2008 to 2013, the dental service organizations went from 2% of the general dentistry market to 13%.
Wow.
Ownership in the general dentistry market. Well, that then perpetuated, more and more of the private equity companies to get involved, and you went from a handful of dental service organizations to hundreds of them over the course of the next several years. So as I saw this occurring from 2008 to 2013, I realized that we were going to have to become a bit more strategic in our growth. Not rely solely on organic growth, but growth through merger and acquisition. So from 2014 to 2015, we went from the 7 locations that we had going into the recession to 14 locations over a 1-year period through merger and acquisition. We then opened up a couple of de novos, did a couple more acquisitions and mergers, and by the time we hit 2018, we had 20 locations, all under the brand of White Maggard Orthodontics, all within 60 miles of where I'm sitting here in Lexington, Kentucky. And we had a pretty significant market share. So at that point, I had to take a look as managing partner of White Maggard, what does our exit strategy look like? So I started looking into the DSOs, and then I started talking directly to the private equity companies as well. And it really came down to their offer was the same. Despite the differences on their websites of core values and so forth, the proposition was the same. Here's the valuation of your practice. It's more than you ever thought it would be worth. It's a 5 or 6 times EBITDA as opposed to a traditional 3 to 3.5 multiple of EBITDA. So your practice is worth a lot more than you thought it was. We're going to give you half of that money up front, and then we're going to give you the other half in stock. And they said, but since we're buying the EBITDA, you're going to have to take a greatly reduced hit in your income, because the difference between what you were taking home in profit and what you're going to take home in profit is what we're going to multiply this 5.5x by. So it ended up, here's a check, here's your new and greatly reduced income that you're going to have to continue to generate the same revenue for, and here's your stock. We're going to flip this up to the next tier private equity company within the next 3 to 5 years. So you need to say some really nice things about what you've done here and promote it so that other people will do the same, so that your stock value will rise and you'll get the second big payday. So when I looked at that, I went to my partners and I said, it's going to be really difficult for us to do this and live out our core values of always doing what's best for the patient, because I don't know that we can guarantee what's best for the patient when we don't even know who's going to own this 3 to 5 years from now. Who we make the deal with now and who they make it with 3 to 5 years from now is completely out of our control. They're saying we're partners with them, but we have no say in who this sells to, so it doesn't sound much like a partnership to me. It sounds like that we're taking on all the liability for the treatment and treatment outcomes of patients, but for a lot less than what we have received in the past. So we decided that we could not live with that uncertainty of what was going to happen to the practice that we'd spent 2 and 3 decades building. So we decided that the best path forward was self-consolidation. See, the thing about these private equity companies and the DSOs is they're not doctors mostly. They don't treat patients. They don't generate income. They didn't build anything. Okay? So there's no way for consolidation to occur in that form without express complicity by the doctors themselves, much like the physicians did many years ago and the corner drugstore pharmacists did many years ago. And they tend to do it the same way. It's their last big paycheck, so they want to get as much as they can. So they do what I call JRC. They justify, rationalize, and ultimately compromise. And they always say, man, I hope you understand, I didn't want to sell out the next generation of doctors who aren't going to have the ownership and the same opportunity that we had. I didn't mean to sell out our profession, but I had to do what's best for my family, which I think is one of the biggest cop-outs of all time. It's easy to say that. But anyway, everybody has their own choices. Everybody has their core values. Everybody either lives up to those core values and lives through them, or they don't, or they pick and choose depending upon what the situation is. So justify, rationalize, compromise. So we decided that we weren't going to be complicit in that we still controlled what was occurring in our geographic region because consolidation had not occurred. So we decided to self-consolidate, and that is when PepperPointe, the facility that was the back office for White, Greer, and Maggard, that we had in 2-3 years before that had pulled all of the human resources, marketing, operations, finance, all of those had been pulled out of the 20 White, Greer, Maggard offices into a central location that we called PepperPointe. We decided to turn PepperPointe into its own company, its own doctor-owned dental service organization, and start approaching the other doctors in the area, orthodontist and pediatric dentist, to consolidate. And this consolidation, this self-consolidation would look like this. No money changes hands. You don't take a decrease in income. In fact, it increases because with the synergy that we have together, we can negotiate rates with third-party payers, insurance companies, and we can negotiate cost reductions with our vendors and suppliers. So no money up front. We build a wall of protection around us to prevent the private equity-backed DSOs from coming into our area en masse. We basically have stabilized what we have built. We set it up in a way so that when we sell our ownership in this group practice, it gets passed along to the next generation of doctors, the associate doctors, who then become the partners. So we're able to reconstitute the old transition model, but in a way that functions and succeeds in today's marketplace. Everybody income rises. And when you get ready to sell your interest and it passes along to that next generation, you still have ownership in the doctor-owned DSO, so that it provides for passive income in retirement, which answers the age-old question every dentist has ever asked themselves: how am I going to maintain my lifestyle in retirement? That's a reason so many dentists get into real estate early on in their careers, is to be able to provide that income stream that will allow them to do that. But that is a really long play and requires a lot of good luck along the way and good decision making. So many of them have that, but this is another way of supplementing that. So that's what we did. And it's worked out really well. And we now have a lot of interest in folks from other states that we're going to help them facilitate the same type of structure.
So can you walk us through a hypothetical example with real world numbers, how that would look?
Yeah. So let's say you have a dentist who, a pediatric dentist who is bringing home, has a $1 million net collections practice, and they are at a 60% overhead, so they're taking home $400,000 a year. That person coming into this group, as we consolidated, has gone from $400,000 to probably $440,000 a year over the last 2 years, without working anymore and against the headwinds of what COVID has brought in. Okay, which obviously higher salaries and benefits, increased costs in supplies because of supply chain disruption, difficulty in being able to get as many patient visits in because of COVID-related restrictions. Still a 10% increase in their income over that period of time.
So they were otherwise probably looking at a reduction, like a significant reduction.
No question. No question. Probably as much as a 20% reduction instead of a 10% increase.
So a 30% swing. Okay.
Yep. And while being able to get rid of the burdens of managing the practice, did not have to deal with going through all of the COVID-related shutdowns. Most all of that was handled by us at PepperPointe here. And then having the supplies to be able to get back to work after that 6.5-week shutdown, while doing so safely for the staff and for the patients. Here we are going into the next year, and we anticipate another 5 to 10% burst from there in terms of profitability. Most of that was done through negotiating prices, the third-party payers up and the suppliers down, along with some synergies that were created that allowed us to increase revenues by 10% in each of those first 2 years for the ortho-pedo consolidation. And then one thing I left out is that went so well that we had the general practice docs come to me late 19, early 20, and we did a second consolidation. The first one was 20 different practices and 50 locations. The second one was 37 separate individual practices and 42 locations. So in a 14-month period, PepperPointe went from managing 0 offices to managing more than 90 in that period of time, and that was all during the COVID period. With all of those, with almost without exception, there are probably 2 or 3 exceptions out of those 87 doctors where their income actually went down, but it had to do more with issues related to their individual practice and patient makeup than anything else. The elderly did not come back as quickly for appointments as a result of their increased vulnerability to COVID.
You said earlier, no money changes hands, essentially. Like, how do you partner with PepperPointe as a...
So what happens is PepperPointe simply facilitates the consolidation. So let's say you have $1 million practice. A friend of yours has a $2 million practice. Another one has a 3. There's another one here. And y'all are all practicing, seeing one another as competitors in your geographic market. And then we have a conversation, and you start realizing that it's better for you guys to see one another as partners rather than competitors. The dentist down the road is not your competitor. The marketplace is your competition. So if you come together and you form a group partnership, and you bring, and your ownership in that group partnership ties you back to your original profitability, that's the way the merger occurs. So let's say in your practice, your profitability is $500,000 a year. Someone else is taking home $1 million a year, and somebody else is taking home $250,000 a year after all their practice expenses. You would own twice as much stock as the person that's taking home $250,000, and you would own half as much as the one that is bringing home $1 million. Your ownership would be representative of that, and your income streams through the group practice and through your own doctor-owned DSO would tie you each back to your original income, and then from that point forward, a 10% profitability in the practice would yield everyone's pro rata share of that 10% profitability. So you get to eat what you have killed up to the point that you come in, and then you start sharing everything that is the benefit of the practice as a result of the group practice on a pro rata share basis beyond that.
Okay, so you're exchanging your practice for shares, essentially, right? And then is there a way to unwind that, or is there like a long-term agreement that's in place?
Yeah, I am a huge believer. I've been married for 31 years now, and I think back to at the very beginning of that relationship, if we were dating and I had gone to my wife, and at the time that I had asked her to be my wife, if she had said, well, Greg, I'd love to be your wife, but is there a way to unwind this if it's not working out? Had I said yes to that, and had she actually asked me that, I would guess that we probably would have been divorced within the first 24 months. Because without a level of commitment, all things are big things. So I told Dr. Greer back in 2002 when we were talking about merging, he asked me that same question. And I said, no, Jim, there is no way to unwind this. I'm going to make this impossible to be able to unwind easily, because if you have a problem that would lead you to think about unwinding this, then I have a problem, and we're going to solve these problems together. So he and I have been partners for 20 years. Dr. Maggard and I have been partners for 22, 23 years. Dr. Loudenbach and I for 18 years. Outside of that one partner who retired, the original one, all of my partnerships have stayed intact all the way through because there's a level of commitment there. And I see that as a litmus test. If that's a deal breaker for people, they're not meant to be a partner.
Yeah, no, that's a great answer. I'm married as well, so that metaphor resonates with me because, you have to have commitment from the beginning, and it makes sense. So you guys, you said you have how many locations right now?
We have 90 locations, I think. Yep.
What's on the docket for 2022?
So 2022 looks like 2 more consolidations occurring in 2 different states, one in the Northeast and one on the East Coast. Those will probably be 20 to 25 locations each, and they will be set up in the exact same structure with the same protections, the same reconstitution of the old transition model, the preservation of the legacy of the doctors, the passive income in retirement, the increased income year by year without having to work anymore, no money changing hands, all of those types of things. Now, when I say no money changes hands, there obviously is at the very end of it when somebody retires, the group practice purchases their stock. So they do get the check at that time, but they also still get the passive income in retirement beyond that. And that stays in their estate. They can pass that along. And that is in all cases a 6-figure passive income in retirement.
All right. And so let's talk about the real estate a little bit. We have to bring it up at some point. Is that totally separate? Like, do you guys look at buying that? How do you guys handle that?
Yeah, so we have a separate real estate company. So all of the partners in those 2 groups have the opportunity to participate in a real estate company. And so of the 87 partners, 72 participated in the real estate company. We set it up separately because I do not want to utilize the assets of the group practices for real estate. I don't want to tie it up in that. I want to utilize that if we, as a group, decide to purchase other practices that are for sale that were not part of the initial consolidation. And so what everybody has done is they've just thrown in some money into the operating account, and then we just throw in 25-30% down on any pieces of real estate that we purchase. So that real estate could be group practice related. It could be one of the offices that one of the existing doctors owns. It could be one that a third party is leasing it to the group practice and they're wanting to sell. Or it could be, apartment complexes. It can be anything that we want it to be. It does not have to be within the scope of the offices that we either lease from one of our owner doctors or we lease from a third party.
Okay, so is that like a separate group that you're working with that acts as the general partners for the real estate? Or who's kind of managing that?
So we're managing that internally at PepperPointe right now because we just started that company earlier this year. You have to realize the time frame we're on. The initial consolidation of the orthopedo group occurred in August of 19. The consolidation of the general practice group occurred in October of 2020. And so 2021 was when we formed the real estate company, and we've just made an initial purchase on that. But now in 2022, we'll look for several more opportunities. Right now is a little bit of wait and see period for us on the real estate side because the effects of COVID and the influence it had on the migratory nature of people has certainly caused a bit of turbulence in the market. Two different ways. Residential has skyrocketed and professional office space has not necessarily. And so this is a good time to kind of put the brakes on, tap them a little bit, wait and see how this is going to settle out to see where the best opportunities are and in which particular area we should make those investments.
Okay. Yeah, and that makes sense. And so what's a commonly held belief in your industry that you disagree with?
Say that again, I'm sorry.
What's a commonly held belief in your industry, in the DSO space, that you disagree with?
Well, I think the biggest one is what was the primary impetus for us self-consolidating, and that is I am a huge believer that the doctor must own their practice in order to make a long-term commitment to it. We have precedent for that. I don't think there are many people that would argue that that care in medicine is better since the doctor no longer owns their private practice, or that the care that you get and the relationships that you build through a pharmacist in one of the big chains is the same as it used to be when you knew the pharmacist at the corner drugstore. So the same thing will happen when these doctors JRC and take this money and give up ownership to the private equity-backed DSOs. It results in a 35% turnover of the doctors. I don't think that's good for the continuity of care for the patients. I also think that when that doctor doesn't own that practice, they don't invest in the community. They don't give to local charities. They don't even have the opportunity to. It's not their call anymore. It's somebody in another state far away that's making that decision. How much are they going to invest in the local ballet or the local sports teams or the local heart walk? It's not going to happen. So you don't invest in the community any more than you're going to invest in new brakes on a rental car that you get from Avis. So that's where we differ. This entire model was created, and every feature associated was created in order to protect and preserve the long-term care of the patients in dentistry. And the only way that that can happen is for doctor ownership to exist, and the only way doctor ownership can continue to exist is to create a pathway to ownership to the next generation of doctors and for us to pass it along to them. Yeah,
no, that makes a lot of sense. I think that's a good place to kind of start wrapping this up. One of the questions I always like to ask is, do you have any book recommendations that are influential on you, or podcast recommendations that you think other listeners might find to be beneficial?
Yeah, so some of my favorites, I'm just going to give some books that I think are fantastic. I think Good to Great is fantastic. How to Be a Great Boss, Traction. One by Lafley and Martin I think is really good is a book on strategy called Playing to Win. And then maybe my favorite one that I keep rereading is Collins and Lazier, Beyond Entrepreneurship. A lot of people that I would suspect that listen to this podcast are either serial entrepreneurs or would-be entrepreneurs, and you really have to understand that there is a point at which that entrepreneurial spirit and that risk-taking and that is essential in taking those risks and being willing to lose something in order to gain something that other people don't have because they aren't willing to take that risk. But once you become successful at any one of those things, you have to flip your mind switch from being an entrepreneur to being a CEO. And those are two very completely different mindsets. One is about risk taking and imagination and creativity, and the other is about discipline. And those don't coexist naturally and easily within the same person.
Wow.
So that has been one of my biggest challenges, is moving from being an entrepreneur to being a CEO. I am not a classic CEO at all. And it requires a lot of discipline, and I'm sure it creates a lot of consternation from the people that have to live with me every single day at work. But I'm trying to improve at that day by day. And I think that's just something that people need to realize. There will be a lot of people listening to this who are going to be very successful and who are going to create successful things through that risk taking. Then being able to understand that you have to flip that switch, or if you can't, you've got to get somebody in there that can run what you built better than what you can run yourself.
That's great. It's a really interesting, lens to look through, the personal shift you have to make, because a lot of times, what got us to where we are isn't going to get us to the next level or where we want to be. You have to have a major shift, and that's what it sounds like this book addresses. So I'm interested in checking it out. And then what's a good way for people to reach out and get in touch and learn more if they want to know more about, PepperPointe or whatever?
Yeah, absolutely. The best way to reach out to us is through our Chief Strategy Officer, Julie Boer, and that is JBOOHER at pepperpointe.com. PepperPointe has an E. Here it is. I'm going to have here. PepperPointe.com, PepperPointe.com. So that's J Boer at pepperpointe.com.
Okay, cool. And I'll write it down in the show notes. So, all right. Well, hey, this has been fantastic. Thanks so much for your time. I love what you guys are doing. I think it's an interesting concept, and I think it's going to have a lot of traction. It already has a lot of traction, so I'm excited for you.
Well, I really appreciate it, Austin. Thank you so much for having me on today. And I just want to wish I don't know when they're going to hear this, but this is right before New Year's. I hope everybody has a fantastic New Year.
Yeah, it'll be a couple weeks. So, I hope everybody has a good holiday and good New Year.
I hope everybody is recovered from their New Year then. How's that?
Yeah, and hopefully recovering from COVID too, as the new variant sweeps through. So
yeah, well, this is the next one. How many Greek letters are there in the alphabet? I got to figure out how many of these we're going to have to deal with.
Well, I was saying, if they want to really push against the people who are not getting vaccinated, they need to call the next variation Megatron, and then they need to change the vaccine's name to Optimus Prime.
I like that. Yeah.
You'll get a lot more people.
Yeah, and then maybe call the next one Zeta, so at least we'll think it's the last one, right?
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, you're encouraging. It's hilarious.
Well, awesome. Thank you so much, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.